This is The Allusionist, in which I, Helen Zaltzman, search for the hidden meaning in language. Shuffle those letters around. GNU algae? That's it! It was staring us in the face this entire time. Welcome to another instalment in the Wordplay series about word games and word puzzles. This episode is about crosswords. Crosswords have come up a couple of times before in the show. One of the very earliest episodes was about how British-style cryptic crosswords work, and in the 2017 episode, Encrypt Decrypt, I covered the Lollapuzzoola crossword tournament in New York City. Today we hear from some people doing some very cool stuff in crosswords in the USA. Content note, there is one Category B swear. On with the show.
What I see a lot in crosswords is, I think, not unique to crosswords, where historically they've been for a very specific cross-section of an audience. They're written with like certain people in mind and certain other people not in mind. And I think we're like starting to see the tip of the iceberg of some changes that expands the range of who they're for. And as you start to see that, those people in that first group are going, this is worse than death. How can you take this thing away from me by having like one rap clue?
Be terrible if they ever had any real problems.
It would. My name is Eric Agard. I am a crossword constructor and editor. I've been constructing puzzles for over a decade and started editing about 5 years ago. I
first met you in 2017 at Lollapuzzoola and talked to a bunch of people who were like, a lot of the big setters are old white men. And a lot of their references are stuff that you had to be an old white man who was collecting like baseball cards in the 50s to understand. Mm-hmm. Is that a reasonable perspective of a few years ago? And is that still dominant in the field, or have things shifted?
Yeah, I think that's, if you start in the archives of like the New York Times crossword today and you solve backwards in time, you will absolutely see that more and more. I know so much more about baseball in like the 1930s than I did before I started solving crosswords. I know so many Beatles titles and lyrics that I did not know. I think today it's a lot younger in some instances. The Beatles have been replaced by Taylor Swift. The baseball is sometimes other sports. Mm-hmm. I think there are still many of the same gaps that were there before are there now. And people are working on that with varying degrees of success, but change is always glacial.
What pleases you most about this work?
Coming up with a great clue is always like, I will stand up at my desk and fist pump like a golfer. It's really, really fun to make a grid for me. It's just something that's very like meditative. It's a puzzle in and of itself, just to find words that go together in a very satisfying way. So constructing a crossword typically involves, you come into it with some kind of idea. It can be either a word or phrase that you really like. Often there's some kind of wordplay going on. A few of the answers in the puzzle will be interconnected in some way that's clever or informative.
Okay, you fill the grid with the answers first. Writing the clues comes later.
In the old days, and some people still today, people would fill it by hand, but a lot of it is software today. Usually when you're constructing a puzzle by software, you have a word list, which is supposed to be every word you could conceivably want to put in a crossword. And the software will pick out the best combinations of words that will fill out a grid.
The software can tell the crossword constructor, here are words that will fit the grid and intersect with each other.
Historically, word lists are drawn from maybe a series of dictionaries and other like reference sources, and then also what has been in other puzzles. So if somebody puts an answer in a puzzle, it goes into a word list, and then it comes up for you to use it as an answer. So there's this kind of feedback loop. My problem is I'll be constructing and I'm going through my word list, and there's like so many names of plant genuses and like old athletes that I'm never ever going to use. But then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this list doesn't have Kiki Palmer in it or whatever. And a couple years ago, another really good constructor named Erica Shung Wojcik started this thing called the Expanded Name Database. It's a crowdsourced list of like people and terms from marginalized cultures that you can just add on to your word list and make better puzzles. The human part of it is deciding what's the best words, right? What you think is interesting, what you think people are going to know, things like that. And then just writing clues, writing fun, interesting clues.
When you say what you think people are going to know, do you ever hear from indignant people who are like, how am I supposed to know that, Eric?
Only about 1 in every 1 times I have a puzzle out will I hear that.
Very low proportion.
Yeah. I tend to operate a lot in Black culture for a lot of my puzzles, and I guess a lot of people some people who solve crosswords really don't at all. So you will hear things like, Kiki Palmer, who's that?
That is just rude.
I've never heard of shrimp and grits.
I mean, they should be ashamed of their ignorance rather than sharing it.
I mean, it's okay to not know things. I think the way that you handle not knowing things is perhaps important.
Yeah.
But everybody has their gaps.
And then if your puzzle is getting published via an organisation, how much editorial input do they have? Do they make many changes?
It depends on the place. Puzzmo is a relatively new crossword outlet. That's one of the places that really leans into preserving constructor voice and constructor intent. I've had a puzzle there where barely any edits happen. But yeah, a lot of places will change 50 to 80% of someone's clues. And sometimes you get the opportunity to look at a proof beforehand and see their changes and say, I'm uncomfortable with this, or I really wanted this angle, and maybe they revert it or make some change. Maybe they don't. But once it's out of your hands and into their inbox, it's kind of the Wild West for a lot of places.
The man is a genius. If Eric gave me a puzzle, I would not even edit it. I would be like, okay, here, this is ready for publication.
That's crossword constructor and academic Rachel Faby. You'll hear more from her later. While crossword constructors like Eric, who make puzzles for some of the bigger outlets like newspapers, have little control over what happens to their clues, they also don't know when their puzzles will get published.
Something happens, I write a puzzle about it, and then 2 years later the puzzle is running with half of my clues changed.
2 years?
I've heard of one guy whose submission got accepted and then lost for 11 years. I'm pretty sure that's the record.
Wow. Maybe some of the references are that out of date because the puzzles have been behind a desk for like 10 years. Just lost.
Right. They just found something from the 1960s and they were like, hey, this is in pretty good shape.
Yeah, just blow the dust off. Yeah, Ringo Starr's still in his 20s.
But yeah, it depends on the place. I think if I send a puzzle today, it might run in anywhere between 3 months and a year and a half, 2 years.
So you can't put in anything super current.
Right.
Is that frustrating, not knowing?
It's I mean, it's frustrating not being able to. I mean, I think the great thing about indie puzzles and places where you're able to have a quicker turnaround is you can, Beyonce surprise drops an album today and tomorrow she can be in the puzzle, and I think that's just a lot more fun as a solver and as a constructor.
Although the newspapers are still where a puzzle is most likely to get a big audience, in recent years, there have been far more options for constructing and publishing crosswords.
As crosswords have become more of an online thing, there's definitely been a lot more activity in the indie realm. And you're starting to see things like, one of my favorite crosswords that I play every day is Black Crossword by Juliana Pache.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, love it so much. It's just a 5x5, usually mini puzzle. And it's just like one brilliant person making a puzzle every day.
My name is Juliana Pache. I'm the founder of Black Crossword. It is a digital destination for daily mini crossword puzzles dedicated to Black culture. Launched in January 2023. And we have a book coming out in August, our first puzzle book of minis with Amistad HarperCollins. You can pre-order that wherever you get your books.
What was the first crossword puzzle you ever made?
So I had the idea for Black Crossword before I'd ever made a crossword puzzle, actually.
Love it.
Yeah, I know. Wild. I love word games. I love brain teasers. So I had the idea for Black Crossword when I was playing the New York Times mini, and it felt pretty white that day. Um, I had the thought, I wonder if there's a Black version of this. And so at first I was looking for it. And then I discovered that it didn't exist. And I was like, well, I'll just make it and I'll figure out how to make a crossword puzzle. That'll be fine. It'll be easy. Little did I know.
It seems really hard to make a puzzle every day.
It is. It is. It's a lot of work. It took me a bit of time to figure out how to do it. And I started with minis, and those are more manageable for day to day, much more manageable for a day to day. We typically have 5x5 minis. Sometimes they get a little bit bigger towards the weekend. Because they are 5x5s, there are certain words that come up so often. While I'm creating puzzles, I'll have to block out certain words because they come up so much, and I don't want them to be repetitive. I try to have at least 3 clues related specifically to Black culture, but the rest of them are more general.
And because Juliana publishes her crosswords herself on her own website, blackcrossword.com, she isn't working to the unknown publication dates that Eric mentioned. She constructs her puzzles just a few days before they go live, sometimes even the day before.
And sometimes that serves me well, because if there's something timely happening in the news, then I can very quickly maximize on the moment and incorporate it into tomorrow's puzzle somehow.
How have you felt that your crossword constructing has evolved?
I think it's gotten a lot better. There are small etiquette related things that I didn't consider in the beginning of crossword puzzle constructing.
Oh, yeah.
I really appreciate the cross world and the crossword puzzle community, because the way that they will gently mention a style thing has been so helpful in my getting better at this medium.
So what kind of etiquette are we talking about?
There's like 5 or 6 things that somebody in the 1950s just decided, like, this is the way that every crossword should be. And now you just like have to do them if you want to get a puzzle published most places. Like, the grid has to be rotationally symmetrical, which means that if you flip it upside down, the black square pattern stays the same. The theme answers, if there's a theme, have to be symmetrical with each other in the grid. If it's a Monday puzzle, you can go up to 78 words. But if it's a Friday puzzle, you can only do 72 words. If it's a Sunday puzzle, you can only do 140 words, which is so incredibly annoying and unnecessary. You as a solver have never sat there and been like, oh, this puzzle has 142 words? What a piece of shit.
There's so much to think about. There's also, you don't want to put anything too gruesome or gross or having to do with bodily fluids, because you want it to pass the breakfast test. Yeah, which is basically you don't want to be eating your breakfast doing the crossword puzzle and be thinking about bodily fluids.
The breakfast test seems quite a divisive concept among crossword constructors. I guess some of them do want to be thinking about bodily fluids over their breakfast crossword.
All of these rules do not benefit solvers. If you just want to start making crossword puzzles, you can do that and you can follow the rules or not follow the rules. It's just, if you want to start getting published, most places, it's something that you have to invest time into learning. And I think that's unnecessary and Procrustean and, you know, in a lot of cases should be abolished. But that's kind of the lay of the land right now.
If we check back in 7 years, maybe it will be abolished.
If you check back in 7 years and symmetry is no longer required in any major venue, you will find me retired, living happily in a cottage on an island.
Also, symmetry the enemy all along. Although not for Rachel Faby.
I prefer symmetrical puzzles. That's not a universal preference, but I think it goes with my aesthetic preferences. I actually think it adds a useful constraint. Because when you can put blocks anywhere and you can put whatever you want in the puzzle, there are too many options. So I like having the constraint of symmetry because it helps me pare down my options. And then the most interesting themes will impose a constraint on what you can put in the puzzle. And so trying to find the tightest set, which is like the smallest possible set of things that have something in common, is a really sort of challenging but rewarding part of constructing. For me, personally, the hardest part is writing the clues. I really enjoy the process of putting a grid together. And once the grid's together, I want to make another grid. I don't want to write, I don't want to write clues.
Juliana, what have you found particularly satisfying when constructing Black Crossword?
When there's a cultural reference that I just know would otherwise not exist in a crossword puzzle, I'm like, oh, this is what makes this so special. So, for example, one of the clues today is type of surfing, question mark. And unless you know the very popular song, well, at least in Black communities and Black culture, swag surfing, you might not really understand that, but you know it's kind of like cheeky. So that kind of clue really can exist in the context of Black crossword. So things like that are really fun for me. I don't have to over-explain a cultural reference as I might need to in a more general crossword puzzle.
I found out that Faith Ringgold had died from doing the puzzle. I was like, oh, Faith Ringgold. Oh, no, she died.
Oh, no.
I mean, I know she was old, but I was still like, oh, damn.
Yes, R.I.P. Faith Ringgold.
If this is how you found out that the artist Faith Ringgold died in April 2024 at the age of 93, well, I'm sorry. But what a great reminder to go and look at some Faith Ringgold art. Despite my surprise at her death, I was still very excited to see her as a crossword clue.
My first solo byline was about 3 years ago, and it was a Mario Brothers theme, bringing video games into the puzzle lexicon. It brings a little bit of joy to your life, like a little comic relief sometimes. The Mario Bros. One, people had a cultural fiesta over saying, oh, gasp, Mario Brothers is worth the same cultural stock as like Shakespeare or opera or old baseball players with 3-letter names that we still only know because they only appear in crosswords. And I'm like, yeah, isn't it cool? I'm Adrian Johnson. I'm a professional crossword constructor. I started writing after solving came relatively easily to me. I've kind of solved like crosswords here and there a little bit since I was in middle and high school. I'd look over people's shoulders and tell them the answers, and then they'd get mad and they'd be like, go get your own. And eventually I listened when I was a junior in college.
At that time, Adrian was dealing with a bad situation with his roommate, so to avoid having to spend time in the room with them, he would go and hang out in the basement of the campus centre, doing puzzle after puzzle from the New York Times archives.
Like I would just sit on my phone and I would play for like 3-4 hours, sometimes nonstop. That kind of sense of escape from what was otherwise a really, really challenging semester. Personally, like I don't even know if it like brought me joy per se, mindlessly going through puzzles. It was more of a way to latch on and find something positive to invest in and to let control me rather than the kind of realities I was dealing with. And so that kind of spiraled in a good way from solving months and months and months and years of puzzles into that curiosity of what makes a good puzzle, how do you do it, where am I going to learn?
At first, Adrian was making his own grids on Microsoft Word before finding out about the various options for puzzle-specific software.
There's a whole nother community on Discord, even on Reddit, on Facebook, that is willing to put in the work to share the tricks of the trade with you and be that support for an otherwise really nerdy hobby. You need to be engaging with the community. You need to be learning and growing and trying new puzzles and expanding your vocabulary, reading about the world, playing trivia, doing all these great stuff. Keep it fresh. Keep what the idea of puzzles and games could mean to you always fresh and never fully set in its one way. I taught my 13-year-old cousin how to write a crossword, and we wrote one collectively for Universal.
That's awesome.
Last year, it ran in February 2023. I've worked with people at like the Peace Corps. I started mentoring a Palestinian woman who came across our puzzles for Palestine.
Puzzles for Palestine is a pack of crossword puzzles that Adrian and Olivia Mitra-Framke put together with a team of crossword constructors to raise money for humanitarian aid organisations working in Palestine, and to feature more Palestinian culture and references than most crosswords made outside of Palestine tend to do.
You can highlight a Palestinian artist or a type of movement or a type of style you really like. It could be words like olive that have very direct connections to Palestine. It could be also different dual use items like a key, the symbol of Palestinians' right of return that they often wear on a necklace to symbolize their homes that were taken during the Nakba. One of my favorite themes, how much spoiling do you want me to do?
That's up to you.
So there's a Palestinian rice dish that's prepared in a very specific way, and its ingredients are hidden in one of the crosswords. There's quite a few based around Palestinian food. Natan Last, who's done a lot of tremendous work in refugee advocacy, he chose to focus primarily on Palestinian writers.
And Eric Agard contributed a crossword concentrating on Palestinian films.
The most common ways you'll see the Palestinian culture represented are through writing, poetry, novels, documentarians, scholarship, and through food. But we also have plenty of other different ways that we've brought things in. One of our puzzles has the entry scarab. So normally, the most common way you hear about a scarab beetle is it's an old ancient beetle of great importance to the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians. What you may not know is there is a superhero called the Scarlet Scarab. And that actually kind of centers Arab female identity in almost a pop culture sense. And we did have a couple of Palestinians look over every puzzle, like to just fact check for cultural accuracy. There are plenty of Palestinian people that really, really like crossword puzzles. We didn't necessarily do it for Palestinians because they already know their stories and their truths. They didn't need us to tell these stories. But we felt an opportunity to use our creative medium to incorporate them into a space where Palestinian voices are at a premium if they exist at all.
Puzzles are a space where, I mean, there's limitations on it, but it is a space where you can talk to people and advance certain things.
When I was interviewing the guests for this episode, every one of them name-checked Nate Cardin, who in 2018 was one of the people who launched Queer Crosswords, the fundraising pack of queer-themed crosswords by queer creators that has raised tens of thousands of dollars for LGBTQIA plus charities.
After Queer Crosswords, I think the Overton window shifted on what could be in a crossword puzzle. And last year, gay porn was in the New York Times.
Wow.
Like as an entry.
Great.
Yeah, I just, it's something that I never thought I would see. And it's happening so quickly because as younger and more inclusive constructors get their puzzles published, it changes what's acceptable. I think the younger generation, the Gen Z constructors, the millennial constructors who are putting these things in their puzzles are pushing older constructors to expand the kinds of puzzles they've made and to really look at who their imagined average solver is and try to shake that up.
It's really exciting.
It is really exciting. It's a fun time to be in crosswords. My name is Rachel Faby. By day, I'm a professor of bioethics at a medical school in New York State. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm also a crossword constructor and editor. I have been constructing since 2019, and I run the crossword puzzle fundraiser called These Puzzles Fund Abortion.
I was hugely inspired by our work, actually. I really like Eric's puzzles a lot. And he and Rachel were both probably two of the biggest inspirations to starting the Puzzles for Palestine project.
These Puzzles Fund Abortion, which has been, I think, a yearly fundraiser that has been going on for 4 years now. Fantastic puzzles, fantastic editing, and all sorts of constructors, just come together and donate puzzles to these efforts. And it's just like, it's some of the best work that you can find out there. And it's also for a good cause.
Thank you. We're very proud of them. We put a lot of time and effort into them and testing and editing. And it's sort of a 6-month-long process getting these puzzles from start to finish. We have over 50 people sort of involved in this process, which is why it takes so long. It's about 40 puzzle makers and then an additional 15 test solvers.
Tell me how These Puzzles Fund Abortion got started.
I did my PhD in bioethics in Baltimore. And at the time, I was good friends with the president of the Baltimore Abortion Fund. And she reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing our annual fundraiser. It's called Fundathon. And I had the thought that maybe you could make a puzzle for us and we can offer that as a prize for fundraising. And I was like, yeah, I'm happy to make you a puzzle. And I made just like a small one-off puzzle. And they raised, I think, like $900 with that one puzzle. And then the next year she asked me, if I would do it again. And I said, I can do you one better. Having seen the success of queer crosswords and other charity packs, I was like, I think I could do that. And I pulled together a bunch of my friends and we made a pack of 14 or 15 puzzles. And we did our own fundraiser for the Baltimore Abortion Fund. And we raised about $35,000 in that first year, which blew my mind. I mean, I really thought we would maybe get like $4,000 if we were lucky. But the crossword community really came together and chipped in and supported this cause. And so we're like, wow, I guess we have to keep doing this, right? Because if it worked once and we stop when the need is still there, it's hard to justify stopping. So the next year we did it again. I brought on a couple of my friends, Brooke Husick and my friend Claire Rimkiss, and the three of us solicited and edited another pack. This was in 2022 now, that made like $70,000 because the Dobbs decision leaked in the middle of our fundraising. So the donations basically doubled overnight. And so we've kept doing it since then. And they tell a story, they have a message, and they're still fun, right? Like it's not bleak, and it's really celebrating reproductive rights and reproductive justice. And there's, I think, a good overlap between people who solve crosswords and people who support progressive causes. I don't think that that's a one-to-one. I certainly get complaints from people who don't share those values. But I think, people who solve crosswords are in general curious about the world around them, which leads to wanting to engage with progressive causes. And so it's a good pairing.
I started constructing in maybe like 2012. I was in high school. And when I was first starting out, the thing that I wanted most was just like to get a puzzle in the New York Times. And I probably sent them 15 puzzles before I got an acceptance. At any point during that time, if you had like handed me an answer key and said just like, this is what you need to do to get a New York Times published, I would have just done it, whatever it was. And it wasn't until a few years later that I started. So in 2017, actually, I was at a rally and I saw a speaker named Erin Lang. She got up and she said, hey, everybody, y'all feeling good? And everyone, cheered and clapped and everything. She said, that's too bad. And just proceeded to like drag everybody for 5 minutes and just talked about how like, she had been out there like years ago saying the same things. Absolutely nothing had changed. And basically said like, everybody here contributes in some way to the harm of somebody else in the world. And like, we need to interrogate that, navigate based on that, and like actually start doing things. And that's one of a few moments that I can point to of just like really shifting how I saw the world, and also getting me to start thinking about every aspect of life as relating to, I don't know, everything else. And so I think it was around that time that I started looking at crossword creation more critically and thinking about, okay, like what's going on in the industry? Like who doesn't have a seat at the table here? What is my intention in making puzzles? If I'm just making whatever puzzles I feel like making, or making whatever puzzles I think that editors are going to like at the New York Times or wherever else, who am I serving? Who am I maybe passively screwing over? I do fundamentally think that crosswords should be a fun diversion more than anything else, but I also think that right now we're not yet to a point where they're fun for everybody to solve. And I think people, especially constructors and editors, need to understand that we're not going to get to that point without concerted effort.
Juliana Pache of blackcrossword.com.
I do think that there have been efforts to diversify. It does seem like it's starting to change for sure. In mini crossword puzzles, which tend to be a little bit more modern, you'll see more of that. More POC and Black culture related clues might be in there. I do think that it's starting to shift.
I had a puzzle, I think last year in the New York Times, that somebody said was the blackest New York Times crossword on record. And I was both like, this is the highest compliment you could give me. And also, I hope someone breaks my record. And somebody said that we put their pronouns in a puzzle and they hadn't seen it before. And that was just like, I mean, wild, but also great.
As well as doing these puzzles fund abortion, Rachel Faby is the crossword editor for Autostraddle, the online magazine for queer women and non-binary people.
Yeah, so that's something that I've been doing for the last 2 years, and it has been so satisfying. Like, it's 4 puzzles a week, 3 minis and a midi size, and they're all aimed at and created by queer women, non-binary people, people who are readers of Autostraddle. And so the commenters who come into these puzzles say things like, I never knew I could solve a puzzle. I had no idea I was good at crosswords, and now I know. Right? Like, it's not me, it's the puzzles I've been solving. And it's so gratifying to see people come into this space that they felt was not for them and realize it could be. And it really is just a question of intent on the creator's side. And so to get to contribute to that has been really rewarding.
Eric, when you're constructing a puzzle, how much stuff can you get in there that people would deem to be politics or activism?
It's tough because, and this is something I'm like trying to get better at navigating as a constructor, because in most crossword outlets, you can't editorialize. So I can't make a clue that says like, vote for whoever. Different places have different lines for what is editorializing. And I think that there are some places where you can do a clue that says Black Lives Matter and others where you probably can't. And I mean, different people think different things are like political or not. Personally, there's no level on which I feel this is controversial, but I've been really excited to have answers like gender euphoria in New York Times puzzles and just have people see that and hopefully feel seen by that. And I think there are people who try to politicize that.
We get asked from time to time, why do you call this pack These Puzzles Fund Abortion? Why not say puzzles for reproductive rights or puzzles for women's health? But we're very clear that the purpose of the puzzles is to fund abortion, right? We want people to know that that's where their money's going. But we also think that abortion is often stigmatized, and it shouldn't be. There's nothing inherently bad or wrong with abortion. It is like any other healthcare that you might need. And so by putting it right there in the name, we're hoping to contribute in our own way towards destigmatizing abortion and just being really clear that this is the cause. And if you're not behind it, send your money somewhere else.
Adrian Johnson of Puzzles for Palestine.
These are just games at the end of the day, right? Yeah, you don't like these games, turn them off. It's fine. I don't mind. Turn them off. Like, these puzzles aren't for you. Great, that's fine. I never said they had to be.
Yeah, not puzzling at gunpoint here.
Yeah, but the fact that these mundane, seemingly insignificant things can show up in places of extreme power, of extreme courage, of extreme resilience and determination, and put a smile on people's faces, at the end of the day, I've done my job. I'm done. I'm good.
And then there's other things. There was a recent talk by Liz Maines Amendzadeh, one of the New Yorker editors, where she talked about frames and how clues that are like ostensibly neutral can still have frames. For example, just using the phrase clean coal, just having that in a grid, no matter how you clue it, kind of advances a certain narrative or position.
Yeah, it's quite a propagandist combination.
Right. Increasingly, I've been trying as a constructor to find more opportunities to do things like that, because it's very easy for an editor to change your clue. It's harder to change the grid. I think once it's in there, if they've accepted the puzzle, I mean, they can clue it badly, but if it's in there, it's in there.
Okay, so if you're making a crossword and you definitely want a message to get through, put it in the answers, not the clues.
It's a lot easier when you're working with an editor that you know you can sort of trust to be on the same page and like keep your vibe intact. But on the flip side, I've had sort of like neutral answers, like the name of a country that I've put in a puzzle and clued in a way that I thought was really cool, and then woke up that morning to see it in the paper and they changed it to something like colonialist or whatever. When that's the case, you learn to be sort of more tactical about what you put in your grids, especially. I don't know if people know how much effort it takes as a constructor to do that, because there are so many random ass constraints already. You're working with all these different boxes and then adding a little extra discomfort of, okay, how can I also make this say something or do something? but I think it's something really rewarding to do and rewarding for solvers, and I would love to see more of that from more constructors.
Your journey doesn't end on a crossword puzzle. It's on all of us to use them as our own catapults and catalysts to starting our own learning journeys.
Any advice you'd give people who want to make puzzles with a purpose?
Yeah, I think the most impactful thing that we've done, the reason that we've been able to have the kind of fundraising success that we have, is because we've partnered with organizations that are already doing this work. The puzzle makers that I work with all care very deeply about this cause, but we don't have the knowledge or the skills to provide abortions or to help people get from point A to point B to get an abortion. That's not something that we know how to do or could do safely. What we know how to do is make puzzles, and we can turn those puzzles into money for people who do know how to do those things. And so partnering with the National Network of Abortion Funds, partnering with the Baltimore Abortion Fund, having those partnerships has been so crucial because it legitimizes what we're doing. Those are recognizable names of organizations. And it takes the pressure off of us to try to solve problems that we don't know how to solve. And it lets us just solve the problem we do know how to solve, which is how do we make crossword puzzles?
Unless you make it so difficult that you can't even solve your own clue.
I have had that experience, actually. I've gone back and solved my own puzzles years later and been like, what is the answer here? My puzzle amnesia is really strong.
No, maybe you're just too good.
It could be it, but I'm skeptical.
That was Rachel Faby of These Puzzles Fund Abortion. The fourth pack of fundraising puzzles is available now at abortionpuzzles.com. And if you donate more than $50, you get the 3 previous packs as well. That is 70 puzzles. You also heard from Juliana Pache of blackcrossword.com, a free daily mini puzzle emphasizing terms and clues from Black culture. And the Black Crossword book with 100 new puzzles will be out in August 2024. Go pre-order it. I do Black Crossword every evening before I go to bed. If I can complete it in under a minute, I feel very proud of myself. This week, I hit my personal best solve time, 39 seconds. Adrian Johnson is one of the organisers of Puzzles for Palestine. Go to puzzlesforpalestine.com to find out how to get this pack of top-notch puzzles. And Eric Agard is a crossword constructor for outlets including The New Yorker, and he's an all-round crossword legend. He also started the Facebook group Crossword Puzzle Collaboration Directory, where people from marginalised groups who want to learn to make crossword puzzles can get mentorship and resources. I'll link to that and all the guest puzzles at theallusionist.org/grids. See you in 7 years.
Sounds great.
Bye. Your randomly selected word from the dictionary today is marcescent, adjective, botany of leaves or fronds, withering but remaining attached to the stem. Try using marcescent in an email today. This episode was produced by me, Helen Zaltzman, on the unceded ancestral and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Music and editorial assistance is by Martin Orstwick of palebirdmusic.com. Thanks to Olivia Mitra Framke. Find Allusionist Show on the social networks, and you can hear or read every episode. Get links to all the guests you heard from and their various puzzles, and more information about the topics herein, and suggestions for other relevant Allusionist episodes to listen to. And see the full dictionary entries for the randomly selected words, and get links to any events that are coming up, all at the show's forever home, theallusionist.org.